Hello, I'm Estelle Matthews and welcome to NSF Food for Thought. This season, ahead of major regulatory change, we'll be discussing chemicals of concern in the food industry, what they are, what risks they pose, and what industry experts think we need to do about them.
The need for change is now. You want to be ahead of that curve. You don't want to be left behind.
We need to start taking the first steps. If you let this get ahead of you instead of you getting ahead of it, then it kind of becomes this monumental task to do in a very short period of time.
It's such a great standard to have, and it's been such a good experience to go do this together.
PFAS, one of the largest and most well-known groups of forever chemicals, are toxic substances that have been found to come from plastic containers, non-stick cookware, and many other products and industrial applications. They don't break down naturally in the body, in wildlife, or in the environment, and they've been linked to increasing risks to human health. Some PFAS are already regulated in Europe and internationally, due to rising concerns about their impact on people and the planet. And a new wave of EU legislation is anticipated to ban up to 10,000 PFAS later this year. Now, today, I'm joined by ROCOL's Jess Baker and NSF's Sam Cole, who have developed and certified the first PFAS-Free line of lubricants. Their proactive approach has helped set a new benchmark for food safety standards. They're here today to share their insights and recommendations for how the whole sector can get behind PFAS-free and ahead of new laws that should change everything. Jess, Sam, welcome to the podcast. Sam, let's start with you. Could you tell us a little bit more about the standard? What is NSF 537 and why does it represent such a significant leap forward in consumer safety and transparency?
So NSF 537 is a new guideline that we have launched that results in the certification of either a food-grade lubricant, a chemical or a sanitizer, or a food contact material being certified as PFAS-free. So the guideline specifically is a formulation review, an attestation, testing, of the actual product to confirm, no intentionally added PFAS, no unintentional PFAS contamination through testing, which results in a certification on our online listing within the White Book, and then involves annual verification testing in following years. The new standard that we have created and kind of launched earlier this year was a partnership, both in the food equipment industry, in the lubricant industry. In general, what we were looking at is kind of like a first step forward. So here at NSF, our mission is improving human and planet health. We started to see more regulations around PFAS as we started to have more conversations, as there starts to become more data around just the adverse human health effects. It really started with conversations, so like with our clients within the lubricant industry, within the food contact material industry. And as the legislation continued to come out, we kind of started down the process of creating these guidelines.
So now, because the timing's right, is that right?
PFAS, it's been used for 70 plus years, right? So it's not a new chemical. It's really the data that's becoming available now. So as you start to see more reports about the bioaccumulation in the body, the links to certain cancers, pregnancy risks, all of those things, it really became just more of a right now, because the legislation is catching up with that. So that was really what triggered us to get in and kind of start this process.
Thanks, Sam. Now, Jess, what an achievement. How does it actually feel to be the first company that's proved you can rid your product of forever chemicals?
Honestly, it's a landmark achievement for us here at ROCOL, and I think most importantly, it's such a significant step for the industry as a whole. Obviously, at ROCOL, we're really proud of what we've done. Being the first, obviously, is a fantastic endorsement for us, and it's a sense of our leadership within the industry as well. But at the core, for us, it's about delivering our promise to our customers and end users. It's been great for ROCOL to be ahead of the regulations and, to be involved in such an important subject, especially given everything going on right now.
Well, we'll hear more in a moment, but let's remind us all, why are these chemicals so dangerous and why are you so concerned about them?
Yeah, so, I mean, myself personally, I have over 10 years experience in the chemical manufacturing sector across a couple of different industries. Obviously, I'm now based within the lubricants industry. And the discussion of forever chemicals and environmental impact and the action we need to take is becoming more and more and more prominent. We know we need to collectively action to prevent any damage to the environment longer term. Forever chemicals here that we're talking about is obviously PFAS, so per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. You know, there's over 10,000 substances in this bracket alone, which is huge. You know, they're virtually, if not always man-made, found in really common items, and I think that's a really important thing to emphasise, to know where we find PFAS. But generally, day-to-day, people are not aware they're coming across PFAS all the time. For example, the pans your non-stick cookware contain PFAS generally, or historically always have done. It's rare to find it without anyway now. And there's so many other widespread applications. Obviously, they were developed during the 1940s and have become more and more common because they do have unique properties. So in terms of a chemical background where I come from, they're brilliant at heat resistance, durability, chemical resistance, just to name a few. But we need to find an alternative for them now. We can't keep using them. 10,000 chemicals, 10,000 different hazard classifications in the immediate concern. Obviously, they all have this long-term effect, potentially if they're in the environment, but there is news articles of PFAS causing all sorts of health problems. And the bigger concern is obviously the long-term use of PFAS. And that is where I think we have the opportunity to make such a big impact. The chemical bonds are so strong that they don't break down, which is obviously why they're called forever chemicals. And there's been so many studies that show the contamination of PFAS in the environment, you know, in places such as drinking water, soil that we grow in our food in.
Sam, can you just bring out a bit more the focus on human health, please?
Yep, absolutely. So, I mean, you know, as Jess talked about, the forever chemical, wide use across a lot of industries. And as we get more and more information and as this becomes more and more of a speaking topic, you know, you're going to start to realize, like, you know, water repellents, you know, what we're spraying on our sneakers, on our carpets, you know, like fire retardants, like all of these different things across everything, you know, where this chemical is, you know, very prevalent, right? So for us at NSF and for my team here specifically, you know, we are very focused across the food industry. So, you know, we're working with everything from, you know, pans, cookware, utensils, all the way through like the food processing, you know, the lubricants, the greases and everything that are in the facilities that are actually making and manufacturing our food. As we continue to focus on the removal of this, I think there are different areas where there's definitely a higher risk or a higher concern. It's really about, you know, eliminating the ones that are linked to harmful adverse effects, you know, the cancers and things along those lines.
Can I jump in on that? Just to ask about, you know, if you were trying to message very simply to people who want to know or don't know, what are the most significant health risks associated with PFAS? And you know, is current scientific research up to speed with you know, where we should be focusing?
Yeah, so I mean, I think research is ongoing and constantly coming out. You know, I mean, definitely the biggest health risks kind of associated with it so far are the links to different types of cancers, carcinogenic effects. There are a lot of pregnancy risks, health risks associated for, you know, both mother and child during like the pregnancy.
Thank you for that. Now, the NSF certification comes at a very critical time as the EU has recently implemented new regulations for food contact materials, with full implementation is going to be expected by next year. The UK is also exploring new regulations regarding PFAS. Can we discuss this a bit further? What changes will this bring about, and how do you think these regulations will support people?
You know, I think this is going to change the way we do a lot of different things. The timing of us kind of doing this now out ahead of the regulations and everything coming out gives people kind of the time to start thinking about the product development now. So, you know, the EU regulations are designed, like obviously with everything we've talked about with, you know, the health effects, the environmental effects, like all of those pieces. I think, you know, the biggest things to look at is really going to be the updates to manufacturing processes. You know, like PFAS has kind of been a staple in a lot of these things. So finding a way to produce it without, and for manufacturers, I think about, performance is still key, right? So you need to meet the regulations, you need to take into account the environment and like people health, but you also still need to be able to provide a reliable product for your end users that expect it to perform a specific way, have specific qualities. Maybe it's being used in a very high heat environment where high heat capabilities are specifically being used. So to reformulate, to kind of remove those things is going to take time, and it's going to take the scientists looking at it and rethinking and really kind of looking for those next replacements and being able to produce and manufacture these chemicals.
Jess, would you tell us about the ECHA proposal?
Yes, so ECHA is the European Chemical Agency, and they published a proposal. It was either late 2023 or early 2024 they've proposed that they would ban all PFAS. I mean, as we've said, that's 10,000 chemicals or more. It's actually the first restriction of its kind, potentially, because ECHA have, previously banned maybe one chemical or 10 chemicals, but never over 10,000. And we believe the approach for this is to avoid what we call regrettable substitution, where maybe you take one PFAS chemical out and put another one in place that's very similar, does a similar job, but inevitably is still a PFAS substance. So still has the same effect in terms of like environmental impact, for example. We do expect there to be some restrictions, and they could be quite limiting. And there are some applications where you rely so heavily on so many of these different properties that there isn't an alternative right now. And that's where, as a chemical industry as a whole, we need to do a bit more work in that to be able to have these alternatives before we can remove all PFAS. But there's definitely going to be some form of restriction, and I think it's going to impact us quite heavily. So I just think work needs to be happening now to prepare for future regulations, because something is coming from the European Chemical Agency.
And this is why partnerships with ROCOL, etc., are so important. So let's ask Jess, when did ROCOL embark on this ambition, and what do you feel the motivation was behind it?
Yeah, so we started working on the reformulation of our PFAS-free food lube range kind of back in mid-2023. And we actually launched the full PFAS-free food lube formulations here at ROCOL in March 2024. We were actually the first to actively remove PFAS from an entire product range across the food lubricant industry. The changes we have made here prevent 425 kilos of PFAS chemicals entering the environment every year, which is the equivalent to like 2 dumpsters full of waste. It's a lot when you think about it, and that's one company. The main motivation and driving force for us to do this so early was due to our customers and the inquiries we were getting. We wanted to be able to give our customers peace of mind, so that kind of established the project of how to reformulate our food grade lubricants. Obviously, as a benefit, when we've done that, the reduction on environmental impact is a huge benefit. So yeah, it's been a brilliant thing to be part of. And when NSF started talking about NSF 537, it just linked up perfectly time-wise with us, with everything we've worked on.
Yeah, Jess, and exciting that you were an active participant in the development of the standard. What was it like collaborating on such a groundbreaking piece of work?
We were approached along with others while it was in the review stage before it was formalised. And it went through a couple of kind of iterations and reviews. We believe that we were picked here at ROCOL because of the market leadership that we have. We are a respectable brand. The fact that we'd already promoted that we had this range of food grade lubricants without PFAS in the formulations, and we'd been championing that. And honestly, it's been an honour. They are the most respected food standard authority, globally. And I think it really emphasises that over the years, we've really built this great partnership. For myself personally, it's the first time I've been involved in something like this across my 10 years of tenure in the chemical manufacturing industry. So it's been a great experience and opportunity, and something I've really enjoyed, actually. NSF, during the review stage and during the pilot stage of testing our product, they were always on the other side of emails or the phone, contactable, responsive, and I just think it's been great, and it's great to have achieved the first accreditation as well with it.
I think it's really important that when we talk about the creation of those guidelines, like a new guideline isn't just, NSF, somebody going out, hopping into Google or their computer and saying like, hey, like AI, like Chat GPT, tell me like PFAS, put this together, type something out, we go and we launch it, right? There is a full process that goes into creating this, and it starts with the science behind it. It starts with our toxicologists, our regulatory affair teams kind of collecting all of the global information and putting together what we think, is a first draft in partnership with, our testing capabilities, what goes into that, what labs, what test methods, all of that. And then once we have it, we work with this group of individuals from the industry, where they take a look at it. They provide their feedback, and Jess and ROCOL were amazing in doing so and looking at that, like sharing, their opinions, just from like their company standpoint, from their philosophies, sharing their science, all of those type of things that go into building this. And it does go through multiple iterations, and it's not just hey, thanks for your feedback, we'll do what we want with it. There is a process in place that says, hey, we've got this group of industry individuals, we need a consensus that everybody says we've got the right guideline to move forward with. And ROCOL kind of being like the first in line, like to be the pilot, the testing, the first through our lab, the first through the sample collection. They really did like pioneer this like for the industry.
I can hear from both you, Sam and Jess, how excited you are. I mean, it is groundbreaking. What are the steps, though, to make sure that other people, especially industry listeners that might be keen to find out what are the steps to make your products safe and not contaminated? What have you learned? What can you share with other manufacturers?
There's one point of Sam's I'd like to kind of go back on and reiterate there. Sam, you referred to like the external testing and how it's, a third party. And that is one of the things that we personally have felt so valuable from this. As you say, anyone can claim something for their own product and you can do the testing yourself. And I'm not discrediting anybody's work or what they claim, but the fact that this is third party testing, it's in an external lab, not carried out by ourselves, it's a gold standard of industry practice, and it's something so important for customers to be able to trust. And I think we've really found the benefit in that already, and it's something that I'd love to emphasise to other people who are looking down this avenue. Going back to, what steps to make your product safe, not contaminated, when we embarked on this journey in 2023, we carried out extensive lab testing, hundreds of hours of lab time and collaboration between different departments here at ROCOL. And we reformulated the food lube range, PFAS-free formulations as we claimed at the time. We literally took it back to basics. We compared formulations with PFAS, without PFAS, in terms of chemical stability, mechanical stability, real life application and use, so that it was a lot of lab testing. We then moved into customer trials so that customers were confident with what they were going to be receiving as well. And though it was predominantly in a lab project, like I said, it's the collaboration of multiple departments here at ROCOL, so commercial, sales, product management. There was a number of people involved and well invested in this. And as a result of the extensive testing we carried out and everything we did, we were really confident that there was no change to the performance or the properties of any of the products reformulated. I guess the advice for other manufacturers who want to go down this avenue is, obviously, you need to review where you're using the PFAS, what it's used for initially. As Sam's already alluded to previously, there's different reasons you might use PFAS. It could be thermal stability or chemical resistance, for example. So you need to make an informed decision of why they're there in the first place to kind of know how to go about that reformulation. I mean, it's important early on to emphasise the impact across the business. So getting the top-down commitment from, senior leadership on what you can achieve and the impact that's going to have is really important as well, to have the support going into the project. I'd say start the conversations now, though. It's never too early. We know something's coming. There is a gold standard there in terms of certification, which you can receive if you do it. PFAS are being talked about more and more frequently. I mean, I see it here in the UK on the news of popping up on, websites that everyone reads nowadays of PFAS chemicals, various things that cropping up more and more frequently. So I think that it's just really important that people get ahead before they're left behind.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just add to that, and I think the message is really, if you haven't started looking at this, now is the time. Like, don't wait until the legislation happens, then try to react quickly. And I think the other driving factor outside of regulation, and we've touched on it, is you start to get consumer demand. And they're asking those questions of those food processors, right? Like, hey, are there any concerns of PFAS in your packaging, in your product? And as consumers continue to drive the demand to the processors start to drive the demand to the lubricant and grease industry. As we continue to just kind of have almost that like snowball effect, you're getting more and more processors that are saying, hey, we're only going to use lubricants and greases that are PFAS-free. It starts with the consumer, it goes to the processors, it comes down to the industry. People are going to need time to react before the regulations come out and build all of this, but then there's just this overarching umbrella of consumer confidence that goes into it across like all of these different pieces as they play together, for the overall industry.
So if consumers, as you're both saying, consumers are driving this demand, you clearly got to keep food safe from other contaminants, etc. Talk more specifically, can you, about viable alternatives to PFAS, and how can brands achieve this without the forever chemicals? Just kind of, again, for listeners who are really, really striving to make this happen.
Honestly, I mean, I imagine Sam's going to agree on this. It's not really a one-size-fits-all question, because depends on your industry, your product, your application. Obviously, we are talking within like the non-food contact, within NSF, not just the wider industry as well as a whole. There are strict guidelines to follow when you're talking about things formulated for contact near food, but it depends on what you're using PFAS for. At ROCOL, we follow obviously NSF, the H1 incidental contact, along with, we've got ISO 21469 as well on all of our food lube products, as well as other accreditations, so halal, vegan, kosher, and they all have to be considered. So you need to look at where you're using the PFAS, what you're using it for, and then taking a wider view of the full picture before you can really think about how you're going to find an alternative, because it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, the chemical and additive industry, it's come a long way since we started developing PFAS chemicals in the 1940s. So, where historically you might have used a PFAS to utilise maybe one or two properties of it, there probably are alternatives for that now. There's not something for every PFAS, I'll be upfront and honest about that. There are certain applications where we use PFAS chemicals for so many different properties that we can't achieve from one compound, but there are a lot where you maybe use it for thermal stability or chemical resistance, that there are options available. So it's just figuring out why you're using it and what your options are, really.
Well, let's bring it back to an example from ROCOL. And what's next for you, and what are you doing to make your products safe going forward?
So obviously a lot of our focus has been within our food lube product range, which is our foods approved for incidental contact, which are with NSF. So our next immediate step is, well, when I actually prepped for this podcast, we had 4 products approved with the PFAS-Free certification, which has turned into 5 overnight. So that's very exciting for us here. Nice to see that on the NSF White Book this morning. But we are looking to have the full food lube range approved, and that is underway at the moment. We are in extensive testing with NSF. So that's the immediate thing for us, but we're constantly testing and reviewing products, looking at product quality, consistency, what consumers want. I'd say watch this space in the future, because it could be an exciting time.
It sounds extremely exciting, but just going back again to the consumers leading the demand, do you think customers actually understand PFAS, and is there more education needed, more public education needed? Because there's there could be a lot of misinformation out there. Sam, perhaps you could think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot of education. I think we're in that phase right now where PFAS as a phrase is becoming very common, and people know that it's out there, that they should be aware of it, they should be looking at it. But I think it really is kind of starting to go through that process of educating and talking about like where it could occur, what type of products, what are some alternatives, what are some good alternatives, because, you're going to start looking at, like cookware is just an example, because, PTFE has been used in cookware, like nonstick coating pans for a long time. So, what is the direction? Is it ceramic? Are there concerns around ceramics, just as far as heavy metals and everything like that? Is it, just stainless steel, aluminum? So we're on a journey where we start to look at a lot of those pieces. And then, in the lubricant industry, we've talked quite a bit about, the science that's going to have to go into it. As Jess just said, like, it may not be a one-to-one replacement, right? Or there may not be a chemical or a solution yet where like, okay, take PFAS out, insert chemical X, and like, hey, we're set, right? It could be.
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, so it could be a combination and finding the right combination, and it could be finding the next thing and making sure that next thing is safe. But so I think that's all kind of part of the journey and part of the education that goes into it, and I think the other thing that's really challenging around it is, so we've got EU legislation coming out, and then, Australia is looking at some legislation, and China and throughout Asia. In the US, I think we're up to 17 states that have, approved, I think up to 30 that are pending. And that in itself has created a challenge, because the US didn't come out and just say like, hey, we're gonna do a PFAS regulation. We're doing it like state by state. And each legislation is slightly different types of products. Like, what is the amount? What is the what's going on? And to make sure that, we're taking safety across the board and all of that, we're really looking at how all of these different regulations play together and making sure that all the boxes are kind of checked, if that makes sense.
Hugely complex, isn't it, Jess?
Yeah, I think obviously it's exactly what you've said, like, the knowledge varies massively, and we found that, we had people asking about PFAS. They might not have known exactly what PFAS is, other than that it's quite a hot topic within the industry. And people who haven't heard of it, and I think for a lot of people who think PFAS, oh, it's a chemical, I don't have anything to do with that. They're not aware that it's such a broad range of chemicals where they can appear, and actually how every single day they probably come into contact with multiple PFAS chemicals. They are everywhere. We actually did some work when we first launched our PFAS-Free food lube range in terms of like trying to educate our customers, and we hosted a webinar which was really useful and we got really good feedback from. And I think public education is really important here. I think for everyone to get on board and have an awareness, like, we need the public education. That's not from us here at ROCOL, from NSF. It's from everyone. So it's not just a particular industry or a particular business type. It's everyone, and the governing bodies as well need to be involved in terms of teaching people what they are, so they're aware of the hazards and the importance of them really long term.
And I think just kind of echoing a thought that you just said, like that's been one of the biggest things we found as well too. When you think about PFAS and the continued education, and I talk to somebody, it kind of sounds like a single substance, a single chemical, like, oh, PFAS, just take it out. But then when you hear like 10,000 plus and like a regulation coming, yeah, people are kind of like, wait a minute, I thought it was, one thing. And it's not necessarily that simple, and it's not necessarily, that concise, but I mean, it is definitely a lot more, it's kind of like, oh, I'm baking a cake and, don't put the flour in. It's not like it's just like change the recipe that quickly, because it's such a big range, and the more that people kind of find out about it, and just all of the implications, it's definitely interesting conversations and educational conversations every time I have a chance to talk with somebody about it.
Okay, I think it's time for a final message from both of you, just really for fellow manufacturers or food processing companies going forward. Jess, let's start with you.
So I would say that I appreciate when you look at PFAS and think about PFAS removal in your products, like, it probably seems really daunting in terms of, PFAS has so many chemicals to start with, so you could be using multiple, but the need for change is now. You want to be ahead of that curve. You don't want to be left behind. And that's not just us here at ROCOL and NSF. It's collectively as, a lubricants industry, and as a wider collective across multiple industries as well. So get yourselves ahead, because the regulations are coming. And as we've already said, it's not a one size fits all. It might take some time to get the reformulations or remove PFAS from your particular product. So be aware of that. And I would emphasise anyone who can to work with NSF when they're ready, because it's such a great standard to have, and it's been such a good experience to go do this together.
For me, I guess, I would say it's a couple of different things. So like there are definitely environmental implications, finding it in like naturally occurring water, finding it in crops, finding it in product. Like we need to start taking the first steps, and then kind of echoing Jess's comments, it's the start now, right? Like if you let this get ahead of you instead of you getting ahead of it, then it kind of becomes this monumental task to do in a very short period of time.
Sam, Jess, thank you so much. This has been an insightful discussion on a very hot industry topic that we hope will inform listeners about the complexities of PFAS, the roles of industry and regulation, the importance of effective collaboration and standards in terms of certification, and help with finding the path forward for safer products and a healthier environment for people and our planet.
Thank you.
Thank you.